Hello, my name is Piaget Jenkins. Today I would like to discuss with you the architecture of RES Workspace Manager 2011. The first piece of architecture we have is actually the Workspace Manager console. Now the console is probably the first thing you will see and is where you will actually compose all your configuration items for your agents, and the Workspace Composer is basically your central point of administration for your Workspace Manager environment. After that, the console will directly communicate with the Workspace Manager data store. Now, this is the central data store for the Workspace Manager environment, and it can run on top of various platforms such as Microsoft SQL Server 2000 through 2008, as well as IBM DB2, SQL Azure, or Oracle as well. And then the Workspace Manager data store would then communicate with the Workspace Manager agent. And the agent is the actual install, the actual point of reference from the machine that you install the agent on. And what happens is that the agent communicates with this local cache. Now, the local cache is downloaded from the Workspace Manager data store. It's essentially a copy that is pulled down from there, which is very useful, especially if you have any laptops or any machines that are removed from the environment. So the local cache essentially makes the agent itself independent of a connection with the Workspace Manager data store. Now, in turn, with that agent and the local cache, the agent also does upstream communication to the Workspace Manager data store, which includes files such as transaction files and log files only. Next up, we have the Workspace Composer. Now, the Workspace Composer communicates with the local cache in order to compose a workspace for the user on that specific desktop, laptop, or user session within Citrix or Terminal Services environment, for example. It is responsible for composing the content delivered to the user based upon the context and wrapping that into a security type situation. After that, we also have filter drivers, which are essentially responsible for the interception of calls as well as registry files and folders that we can actually use to compose that user workspace. And additionally, if you have an offsite environment which you would like to replicate, you can replicate another Workspace Manager data store and have that replicated out so that you can also have the same amount of configuration items there as well. Now, at this point, you may be asking yourself just exactly what is user workspace management? Well, it's best to think of it this way. If we were to start with the regular Microsoft Windows desktop, think of what are the primary things that the user interacts with. Their email, their documents, printers, map drives. These things are what we refer to as content, and also include applications and settings as well as environment variables. Next, we realize that the availability of the desktop items are dependent upon the user's location, account, and the computer being used. We call this context. Context also includes the time of day and identity. We compose the user workspace and content dynamically and on demand based on its context, which can also be thought of as who, what, when, why, and where. Once this workspace has been composed, we then secure it simply and effectively by only allowing the use of authorized workspace items. In doing so, we apply application security, data security, as well as device and network security. Composing and securing this user workspace only takes seconds and is independent from the underlying technologies. Taking content, context, and security together within a Microsoft Windows desktop, RES Workspace Manager creates a managed user workspace and allows you to manage this process for many users at once. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of the actual user workspace and what it is and what that entails, our next step is to figure out how to actually get to a managed workspace. And it's a bit of a continuum here, but where we start at is where you have your current environment, which is your unmanaged live desktop, so to say. And from there, we want to move up to the desktop sampler, also known now as the baseline desktop analyzer. And what this does is that it collects data. It collects encrypted data in the background unobtrusively, and that data is based on the content and the context of the user. Once that data is collected, it is stored in a central storage location, or it can be stored in the cloud as a free service provided by us. Once you have that data, we then move on to the Workspace Designer. And the Workspace Designer is actually found in our Management Console as well. And what the Workspace Designer does is that it allows you to design these workspaces based on the data collected. So essentially, it analyzes the data collected by the desktop sampler or the baseline desktop analyzer, and it takes that data in terms of context and content of the user as well. So for example, if we were to analyze data including applications, it would take that application data and it would take a look at it and say, currently, which users have access to it and which users would keep it, which users have access but would lose access, and which users would get access without having access today. So essentially, this allows you to create a workspace based on context and content regarding applications for a select group of users or a specific user, which is very nice. And then once we have that taken care of, your workspace model is what comes next. Now, the workspace model is part of the management console and enables the IT professional to control which parts of the workspace will be composed and secured by the workspace composer. These managed workspace items will coexist inside of a user's desktop with all the unmanaged workspace items, so any possible impact will actually be minimized. A mix of different workspace models can be used to accommodate different types of users' desktops as well. Now, once we have the workspace model, the workspace designer, and the desktop sampler or baseline desktop analyzer taken together in stride, we can then compose a fully managed user workspace. And we then have a clear understanding of each action item that's taken to get there. And that's RES Workspace Manager 2011, Architecture and Managed Workspaces.